getting logged in, you'll notice that there is a poll that is coming up that is just going to ask, where are you in the adoption journey and what are you hoping to get out of this webinar? So if you don't mind taking some time to answer that, that'll kind of give us a chance to know where everyone is in their adoption journey and where they're joining us from. But we're really excited to have this time together, and just going to give everybody a couple of minutes real quick to get logged in here. I am Amy. I am the program director here at Both Hands. I have had the privilege of walking alongside of adoptive mamas over the last 15 years as they're in different seasons of their waiting period. And so throughout that time, I've had the privilege of going to several different adoption conferences, foster care conferences, and there's so much that happens when women are able to gather together and able to share in each other's stories and in their journeys and provide encouragement while they're in the waiting. But we really wanted to be able to bring that to you so that you had that sense of community and you're able to hear from three different amazing mamas who have walked through different stages and phases of adoption. And so we're just so grateful. Again, there is a poll on your screen. We would love for you to take a moment to answer that poll. And also, if you're looking at the screen view, there is an option where you can expand so that you can see the speakers a little bit larger on your screen. So I really like changing my orientation where all of the camera views are on the right-hand side. So you can adjust that in the top right-hand corner. And then you can adjust and kind of slide that screen over so that you're not just seeing this big PowerPoint presentation with tiny heads. So feel free to make that adjustment while you're finishing up your poll. Also, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. We're going to take some time, and so feel free to open up that Q&A. Each of our different panelists, if they're not speaking, they'll be happy to answer some of your questions throughout the webinar, but also we would love to be able to take some of those questions live at the end. So feel free to take advantage of that. All right, it looks like we've got a good number of people who have already joined in, so we're just going to go ahead and get started here. Again, this was the split screen where you could move it over. So today we're hearing from three different adoptive mamas who have walked different pathways through their adoption journey. One of our mamas adopted internationally, another adopted a domestic infant, and another mama actually walked through a domestic infant, foster care, and international adoption. So we're going to have some really great perspectives to be able to share here. So we'll take a brief look into each of their adoption stories and talk about what kept them going during the difficult seasons and what they wish that they knew along the way. And so I'm wondering if we have a chance to see the poll results so that we can see that. Oh, wow, here we go. Okay, so right now, we've got a good number of people who are just considering, but mostly everyone is home study approved. A good half of you guys are there. So really hoping that this will provide some great encouragement for you in the waiting. And so grateful for some of the agency workers and consultants who jumped on with us as well. We hope that this will be a good resource for you guys to share. So as we're going here, we're going to hear from Amanda Shandley. Amanda, I would love for you to share, when was adoption first placed on your heart? What made you to decide to move forward when you did, and which pathway did you choose and why?
Okay, so God first put adoption on my heart when I was a teenager. I was 15 or 16 years old, and I volunteered at a camp through our church called Royal Family Kids Camp. And that camp asked for children, it was children from foster care and children specifically who were abused and neglected. And that week basically changed my life. Like I hadn't ever seen, I didn't know that there were that those kind of kids are even out there. Like I live in this little bubble. So it really opened my eyes to what is going on in the world. And I was like, I need to do something about this. Um, and that led to all kinds of things. I ended up studying social work, working in an adoption agency, all that stuff. So that was really what started it for me. When I got married, my husband was not quite on board yet. He wanted to have biological kids, at least first, and then he would think about it after. So we had two kids. And then, I was kind of like trying to nudge him and without pushing. And we would talk about it, and he never, still wasn't really coming around. And then at our church, we were actually reading the book Love Does by Bob Goff. And we each had to teach a chapter, and our chapter was called Just Say Yes.
Mhm.
And so when we were writing home that day, Steve was like, I think it's time to say yes because there's not a reason not to. That's what God wants us to do. So we started the process, and I think what led us to do international adoption. We already had biological kids, and working at an adoption agency, I knew that there were families just waiting in line to adopt infants who haven't been able to have kids biologically. So it just kind of felt like international was best for us. And specifically Africa, when I was a kid, my parents sponsored a child through compassion. And so I grew up writing him letters and all kinds of stuff. And so I think that's what put Africa on my heart. And so we landed with Uganda. Just, I feel like God just, lined up all the steps, and that's why that happened. Um, what were all the questions that you had? Sorry. Did I
So,
answer them all?
yeah, so what placed adoption on your heart and what was the time frame to move forward? And then did you get a chance to share where you guys adopted and a little bit about going and getting there and what that
Yeah. Yeah, we adopted from Uganda. We were matched. The whole process took about 2.5 years total till we got him home, but we were matched in September, and then we got to travel to meet him and go to court in April of the next year. And then we had to go home and leave him there, which was very hard. Um, and didn't get to bring him home until the end of July. So it was a big process. And my kids were 5 and 7 when he came home, and he was 2.5. And it was an adventure. That's probably a talk for another day.
Well, thank you for sharing. And next, Crystal Libby is joining us as well. And Crystal would just kind of love for you to answer the same question. When was adoption first placed on your heart? What made you decide to move forward when you did? And which pathway or pathways did you choose?
Yeah, so adoption had been on my heart since I was a child. Like God had planted that seed, and I knew that that's how I wanted to grow my family. My mom even has like books that I did in school, like in seventh grade, about my future, and adoption was always a part of that. And so, fast forward to getting married, and then 4 years in, the kid talk, which he is already on board for the adoption thing early on. We established that before, and so yeah, we figured we've been married 4 years. It's time to start the process of adopting. And we decided to go with international adoption at that time. So what we started with was a pilot program, which we knew would be slow going, and it was. It did not disappoint in that way. It was a month shy of 4 years before we brought our daughter home. And during that time, because we had had all the trauma training, we had attended all of, the conferences and read all the books about parenting kids from hard places. And we had this bedroom that we had actually moved a few times as we moved, that still did not have a child in it, but was ready for two children. We decided to sign up for our local foster care. And we knew that with the training that we had had, we could be, pro reunification. We were adopting through international. This wasn't going to be our route. And, you know, God had other plans. And so during that process, our son that we picked him up from the NICU at 10 days old. He was 6 months old when we went to travel to adopt our daughter and brought her back. And then he was adopted at 18 months. And then the same time he was adopted, I believe, like the same week, if I'm not mistaken, we were presented with a infant domestic adoption situation, to be a private adoption, and he was born about 4 weeks later. So it was slow at first and a lot of waiting. And then all three came into our home within 19 months. So we did the trifecta, as we say, the foster care to adoption, international adoption, and private infant domestic adoption in that way.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Crystal. So now we're going to introduce Elena Thomas. Elena, when was adoption first placed on your heart, and what made you decide to move forward when you did, and what pathway did you choose and why? Also, folks, I'm sorry, before you jump in, Elena, just remember there is the Q&A box. And so if you have questions that you want panelists to be answering along the way, or you have it for us to answer live, please feel free to drop that in. Elena, take it
Yeah,
away.
thanks so much. So our journey looks completely different than the other two mamas you've heard from this morning. Our oldest child is biological, and when he turned 2, we were like, let's try for baby number 2. And we received a diagnosis of unexplained secondary infertility, along with the rejection of IVF treatments. And as a mama, I was so confused, defeated, because the desire to have other children and be a mom to other kids never faded away. And it was in that season of grief, and infertility is a dark, lonely journey. It can be. And that was the time that God started changing my heart and peeling back those layers to prepare us for a clear calling to adoption. And we, everything moved really quickly for our adoption. It was 11 months to the day that our son Connor was born, and we did the route of domestic infant adoption through an agency. So it looks a little different. How we got there, adoption had never really been on my radar. I didn't feel that calling until God took me down a long journey like he does, and I've learned so much through that. But it was through infertility that we knew this was how we were going to grow our family. So.
Well, I'm just so appreciative to you, each of you ladies, for sharing how you got into the adoption process, and would just love to hear if you wouldn't mind sharing, Amanda, some of your favorite resources. What was the hardest part of your journey? How did you find encouragement? And was there a scripture or book or something that you kind of clung to in the process?
So our waiting while we were waiting to get matched, it was hard, but it wasn't that hard because I had two other little kids that were keeping me very busy. So I was busy with them. We also did a both hands project while we were waiting, and that was a great way to take my mind off things and also to bring the community in to be a part of it. It was a really amazing experience. But the waiting in between those two trips was what got me. Because, I had been with him, and now my son is on the other side of the planet. So that was really hard. But I feel like the Lord just kind of gave me a supernatural peace during that time, because I couldn't give myself that peace. It just had to come from him, and I had to trust that he was taking care of him, and he's better at that than I am. So that was yeah, that's how that part was for us. But the resources, The Connected Child by Karen Purvis is number one by far for me. I had that thing in my pocket, like, and would whip it out when things happened. And even after he came home for a long time, I did. Definitely, that is my number one top recommendation. Love Does by Todd Goff is not adoption related specifically, but it's just a great book, and it's really encouraging and fun, easy read too. And then Adopted for Life by Russell Moore. I really like that one. I read that one like when we were at the beginning of the process, and that was kind of eye-opening on some things. Yes, my favorite verse that was so important to me is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. So that meant a lot to us while we were during the whole process altogether. Um, and then just like relying on people around us who were supporting us and having other people who have gone through the same stuff that we had was really important because it can feel lonely when you're not with people who have adopted before because it's hard for them to really understand what it's like. So I definitely would say to like surround yourself with people who have been through it if you can.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Amanda. What about you, Crystal? What was kind of the hardest part? I know with the trifecta, you could answer this several different ways, but how did you find encouragement when things may have gotten harder? And then would love for you to share your favorite scripture too.
Sure. I do think they were all equally hard. The timelines just made the intensity different. For our daughter, 4-year wait was so difficult. We didn't have children in the home for the majority of that. We didn't start fostering until that last year. And that was just really, really hard for me. That was hard for me to know that they were over there and it was just a slow process. There was nothing I could do to speed it up. I did my part. Like the second they give it to me, I'd completed it. And so really just through prayer and connection with other moms that got it, that understood it, was so meaningful because that's just a process that unless you've walked it, you really don't know and have a full understanding of having your child live in another country and breathe different air than you. And so that was just such a struggle. I think I really just committed to reading a lot. I was a big reader anyway, and I still am. But during that time, it was like not novels. It was it was adoption books. It was trauma training. The Connect a Child is definitely like Amanda. That was her go-to. It was also my go-to. It's the number one that I recommend. And Karen Purvis also has YouTube videos from when she was living that she recorded, and then TCU continues those now in adoption trainings. Their website's awesome, and they actually have little flip books and things now to make it a little easier. Reclaiming Adoption and Orphanology were two that I read early on that really just ignited my passion and helped me stay the course during the wait. And I put Give Them Grace by Elise Fitzpatrick. That is just one of my favorite parenting books in general, not adoption related, but just a really, really great resource to all parents. And I normally slip that in like baby shower gifts all the time because it's a good one. But during that, the scripture that I really leaned on was Matthew 10:29 through 31. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows. And that just resonated with me so much because I couldn't be there to let my daughter know I was coming. I couldn't let her know that I thought about her all the time and I prayed for her every day. But God was there. He was there with her just like he's here with me now. And so that was such a comfort to know that she may not know or understand that we're working to get to her. And someone loves her even now, and we're working to get you home. But God was there with her, and He loves her more than I do. And so that was just such a great encouragement to me during that time.
Oh, Crystal, thank you for sharing. And there's some Q&As that are popping in that I know we'll definitely going to get to. And I think Crystal will be able to answer in on the birth mom relationship, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I would love to hear from Miss Elena again. Elena, what was kind of the hardest part? And if you don't mind sharing that, and how did you find encouragement and scriptures too?
Yeah, of course. One of the biggest highlights of that time during our waiting process was we did our Both Hands project, and it still to this day holds such a special place in our hearts. Just being surrounded by such a great community and being able to help our widow I was a part of a small Bible study. Some of the girls I have known since middle school, so that was really important to me. Our church also offers a foster and adoption mom support group, and that was one of the biggest resources and just lifelines for me during our process, because some moms were in the process of adopting, or it was all the way to had adopted 20 years ago. So just being able to connect with those other moms who have walked this journey is huge. It's because people who haven't, like Crystal said, people who have not walked this road and this journey don't understand. And so surrounding yourself with moms that can relate, even now, almost 7 years into the process, it's still very important to me. Um, we had just a network of prayer warriors that prayed for us daily. The other big piece that helped us in that time that was just hard and lonely and silent, essentially, just making sure that Kyle and I's marriage was, it's not perfect, obviously, but just in a strong, healthy place. Because as most of you know, when you say yes to adoption and answer that calling, it's humbling, but it's also puts a target on your back. And so just making sure that our marriage was in a good place definitely helped through that. Um, uh, Song lyrics mean a lot to me. And so one of the songs that I still love to this day is I'll Give Thanks by House Fires. And this verse really just, I would cling to these words. In the silence, I choose to believe you're working in the waiting. Though the future isn't clear to me, I can trust you anyway. And there's such truth to that. And then the verse that we would just hold tightly to is Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And just a reminder that He's given us the strength we need in those hard days of waiting.
Well, I think one thing that we really want to be able to leave the mamas who have joined this, at whatever stage you are in the adoption process and the adoption journey, we just really would love to be able to provide them with some advice, some insight. So, what would you share, Amanda? What would you tell an adoptive mom who's now in the waiting that you wish that you knew when you were in the waiting, but now you know it because you're on the other side?
I think the main thing for me would be that everything's going to be okay. You're doing what God has called you to do, and sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it doesn't look the way that you thought it would. But eventually, it's going to be okay. So trust Him, trust the process, enjoy the time that you're in while you're waiting. I had, the two kids, and I was just wanting to hurry up and get Jonah home, but I kind of feel like I missed a little bit of peace during that time with them, like the last time that it was just them. So I would say, like, yeah, slow down and enjoy the moment that you're in, because God's got it handled, and every day that you're waiting, there's a reason for it. Um, I think also just having the people, like I said earlier, the people around you that understand. Um, and when we first brought Jonah home, that was what I needed the most, was people who knew what it was like when we had the challenges. With him coming into our family, I really needed those people to be there with me, just to help me get through that time. So definitely recommend having a support group of some kind that you can lean on.
Crystal, kind of same question to you. What would you tell an adoptive mama or dad? It seems like we've got a dad or two in here too. What do you wish that someone would have been able to tell you and reassure you?
I think, I mean, not that I have labored physically, but from what I hear, when a mama's pregnant and you go through this whole 9 months thing, then the labor happens, but then your baby, right? And obviously, as bad as it was, you go back and you do it again. I think similar labor is involved in the adoption process. It is painful and it hurts for a very long period of time. But then the child, but then the baby, once they're home, a lot of that melts away in light of that they're here. Now is the beginning. We felt like that was the beginning, but now is a beginning. And yeah, I would just say enjoy the time, use it well to educate yourself and find connections and find your tribe, people that will understand attachment and how you may do things differently. And just really, lean into that during your wait, but know that it will be okay. Like Amanda said, once they're home, a lot of that pain in the waiting will disappear.
Thank you, Crystal. Elena, what about you? What would you tell an adoptive mama who's now waiting?
I would start by saying that God never wastes our pain. Um, each day where it's hard and there's nothing happening and it's just quiet and silent, um, God is using that time intentionally. I would also tell them that um, no matter where you are in the process of that waiting, if you're just filling out that first sheet of paperwork and checking boxes and doing fingerprints and all the things that have to be done, obviously that's part of this. Do it, be prayerful in it. But at the end of the day, God is in control and never lose sight of that. It's kind of just how our son Connor got to us. Those boxes weren't checked and we shouldn't even have matched, but God had created Connor just for our family. So I would just give encouragement and just, God never is going to waste your pain.
Well, and it's no surprise. Both Hands is hosting this webinar, and so I'm going to do a little plug here. I really wanted to hear from these three different mamas because they have different perspectives to share at different times in their pathway, and they all three have stayed really involved in the adoption world and the adoption community. I know each of them utilize different Facebook groups and conferences, and we'll be sending you guys a list of resources afterwards. But each of them did hold a Both Hands project to raise funds for their adoption by serving a widow in the community. And one thing that I love about Both Hands is that we're able to provide you with a pathway to get your community involved in your adoption story. We're not all called to adopt, but we are all called to serve widows and orphans. And by doing a Both Hands project, you're able to invite your community in, and having that resource in the waiting, where you have something outside of yourself that you're able to focus on and bless and kind of adopt a widow in a lot of ways. And so each of these mamas had successful Both Hands projects. Our current average right now is $23,000, and we're giving away $3,000 matching grants for families who are in the adoption process. So if that is where you are, we would love to be able to come alongside of you. Also, if you have any friends or family who are considering adoption and they haven't chosen a pathway yet, I would love for you to have this resource of howtoadopt.org. Our friends at Show Hope put this together several years ago, and it really is a good way to help people to understand first steps, understanding the process, and then also what pre and post adoption support you have. And then we're going to move into our Q&A, but before we do, and there's some really good questions in the chat, please feel free to drop some more in there if you do. But we do have a dad's webinar that we're also going to be featuring in June, where you're going to be able to hear from some different some different dads who walked the adoption journey, and you'll be able to hear from them on if you have some friends. Sometimes it's the mamas that the Lord speaks to first about when is the right time. And so from these gentlemen, you're going to be able to hear some encouragement for the dads who may be a little bit on the fence. And so stay tuned. We'll be sure to email you guys some information on how to register for that. But Crystal, I'm going to jump to you with this first question here. One of the attendees asked, do you have any mamas who have a relationship with the adopted children's family? And what would an open relationship or benefits look like? I know you've got some good stories here to share.
Yeah, I will try to keep it brief because I could talk about this for hours. God changed my heart drastically when it came to biofamily relationships. Sadly, it was the reason we went international to begin with. I was afraid. I was afraid of birth families, and I didn't know how to navigate that. And when God placed foster care on our hearts in that time frame, we went into it as a ministry to children, and what we got out of it was ministering to families, and it changed everything. Nothing will make me cry quicker than talking about my kids' parents because I have seen God work in many ways in my whole life, but I've never seen the same, um, I guess, just transformation that I've seen in birth families' lives that I've been able to be a part of, that I've been able to witness, and you know, through that fear, stepping through the door and allowing God to use me changed not just the life of a child, but it changed um, a generation of a family. And that's not to like toot my own horn or anything. That's just what God can do when you say yes and you step aside. I have one mom that calls me her sister, and she texts me every week, and she truly loves me, and we love her. And we visit her at least once or twice a year because now we're in different states. But we keep up with each other all the time. And through our relationship, God really continued to work on her heart, and she gave her life to Christ and changed her entire life. And she went from not being able to parent five children to now being able to safely parent for the first time. And she has a healthy and sweet 4-year-old that's the half brother to my son. And it gives me chills to know like the work that God has done in her life and how it's going to change a trajectory and it's going to change a generation. I have another birth mom that calls me mom because she was a little on the younger side and didn't have a support system in place. And she has always loved her baby. And this was such a devastating thing for her to have to walk through. And for me to watch that firsthand, that sacrificial love that she showed, placing her child in my arms, the trust that she, imparted to me, is something that I will never forget um, that level of sacrifice, to just be willing to live in devastation because of the love you have for a child and wanting more for them. And we just love her so much. She comes and spends a week or two out of the year with our family because she's also moved out of state. And so that's how we keep in touch with her. But I know every situation is different and is not always safe. And it's not always the best thing. But if it's safe and appropriate, I would highly encourage it. We are able to love more than one child. There's no reason why a child cannot love more than one parent. So I don't think you need to worry about that. Our children are incredibly attached to us. When they fall down and they get hurt, and both moms are there, I'm the one they look for. They love her, but you're still mom. And so please don't let that fear keep you from those relationships if it can be done in a safe and a safe way.
Thank you, Crystal. I feel like you could keep going, and just so grateful for all that you're sharing and all that God has been able to do, where this has been an additional ministry that you've been able to give to these birth moms as well. And so, Amanda, this question I would love for you to answer. For domestic infant adoption, the cost has seemed to be high, and it can feel defeating and discouraging. They're wanting to adopt, but they're also wanting to do it debt free. So do you mind answering that question?
Yeah, sure. So from our experience with our own adoption, I that's what we did. We applied for grants. We got several grants, and we did our Both Hands project, and that was enough to cover everything that we needed. Now I am Both Hands project manager, so I see it happen every day. There are tons of grant organizations out there that like just apply for everything because you never know what's going to work out. So I definitely recommend applying for grants, doing a both hands project. Um, about the cost being so much, it really is. It just keeps getting higher and higher. It's crazy. But I really recommend the agency that you're going to work with, like make sure they have something in place to protect you if the match does fall through. Sadly, we've seen a lot of families lose quite a bit of money when that happens. And so if you can have an agency that already has something in place, I highly recommend. If you want suggestions on that, shoot us a message and we can email you specific agencies that we have seen people work with who have those safeguards in place.
Thank you, Amanda. Also, at the end of the webinar, we're going to provide you guys with the contact information for each of the panelists. And so if you have questions that are really specific that you want to dive in a little bit more on a one-on-one with Crystal or Elena or Amanda, you will be able to do that. Elena, can you take this one? What are some expectations that you had pre-adoption that you had to let go of? What beliefs may have been no longer serving you?
Sure. I think, I had this expectation that we would get our baby and they would hand our baby over and like everything would be, I don't want to say sunshine and roses, but that would be kind of the end of an adoption journey, as naive as that sounds, right? And what I've come to realize is that to be called to adopt or foster care or whatever that might look like, it's a lifelong journey. And each season along the way looks a little different. Um, and I think the expectations that, people won't ask hard questions or, um, you know, maybe look at your family like, oh, our adopted son is biracial. And so you may get like not a sideways look, but like people are like, wait a minute, I'm a little confused. So there's that part of it, those expectations, and just like learning in each step of the way, and being okay not to be okay, and having that again support around you. And when those hard things arise, it's okay to not be okay and ask questions and lean on your people and ask for prayer or support or whatever that may look like. You can't do it alone.
Mhm. And Crystal, do you mind taking this one? How have you navigated raising children that are a different color than your skin? And do they still feel connected to their roots? And how do you facilitate that?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've been super intentional about. And it's been easier in some places that we've lived than others, because we've lived in some very diverse areas where we had every nationality on our street. And then we've lived in some kind of like we are now, where our son and daughter may be the only ones that look like them in our neighborhood. And through that, we have two children that have Samoan heritage, and one is mixed with African American. And so we have been very intentional, especially on the Samoan side, because that is the birth mom that we have in our lives. And that's where our daughter was internationally adopted from as well. That Polynesian community is after it. Like if you go to their festivals and you know, go to their dances and let the kids learn how to siva, Samoa or knife dance, they are well aware of the situation when you walk in, and they're so kind and so accepting and willing to help the kids. But that is also where birth family connections, when possible, is so helpful. The birth families can, really bring that cultural side in. Our youngest birth mom, like I said, shares heritage with our daughter who was internationally adopted. And so when she comes to our home, she's able to speak to them in their native language and teach them their folk songs and things like that, which is amazing. But I do say, be intentional with your church congregation, if possible, to, go to a church that has more diversity. If it's possible for your child to attend a school that has a bit more diversity, all of those little decisions, bring them to a doctor that may look like them or an eye doctor that may look like them. Um, those little decisions that we sometimes have never even thought about when when scheduling our daughter's appointments or signing our kids up for dance or baseball. But if you can find positive mirrors for them in the community. It's so important and they light up. So
Thank you, Crystal. Amanda, I'm going to jump over to you. Can you help answer this? What advice would you give for how to respond to like the well-meaning people who may ask question after question about the process, and sometimes it's just hard to answer?
Yeah, so sometimes you just don't need to because they don't get it and they will say things that will probably make you mad and you've got to just let it roll off of your back and you can give them as much information as you want to. If you don't want to go into the details with them, then just don't. And that's where the thing again too with having the support groups and people who have been through it come in handy because it's difficult to um, try to have to keep responding to people who don't understand. So it's good to have that. I think if you already feel that connection with the people that do understand, it's a little easier to handle the people that don't. But I mean, my main thing for that is like you don't have to don't stress yourself out trying to um, please other people on all of these things. Just do what's comfortable for you.
Mm. Crystal, I'm going to hop back to you again. Do you have some additional tips on international adoption that you'd be willing to share? It seems like there are a couple of people on here who have experienced a disruption, even on the international side, and attachment and feeling attached. But how would you encourage this mom?
yeah, I'm looking at her question right now. Yes. And so with our international adoption process, we went in for two children. That was, our desire at that time. And we had that long wait. And when it came down to it, and we were next in line to receive a referral for two children, the whole program got kind of blasted. And they were asked if anyone would be willing to take a 2.5-year-old with Down syndrome. And that is not anything that we had on our list at the time. And it's not that we wouldn't take a child with Down syndrome. She would just be our oldest. And we, in our minds, were like, we would like her to have some siblings that if something happened to us, they could help take care of her and things. And through fasting and praying for a short period of time, we felt God was like, what are you doing? Like, of course she's supposed to be in your family. And through that, yes, it did keep it to where we couldn't adopt the second child because the timeline and things just did not line up. We'd have to travel back pretty like close together. And so by saying yes to her, we said no to our second referral, which, God knows your heart. And in a wild turn of events, which is a total God thing, and this was why I say just trust him with your story.
Mm.
It was about a year after she came home that we were approached by a birth mom who was Samoan and lived about 3 hours from us. And the things that she asked for was our family entirely. She wanted a Christian family and she wanted one that knew something about her culture. Our daughter came from her island, which is a tiny island that's not common at all to meet Samoans in general, at least where we were. And it, the agency said when she saw our profile, her face lit up for the first time they saw her smile. And that was not something we had planned, by the way. That was only 4 weeks after our son was adopted through foster care that our youngest son was born. But God had a different plan for us. Yes, He gave us two children with that same heritage and that same connection, but in two completely different ways. So I say, as far as, the interruption, it's heartbreaking, but God has a plan in it, and it may be something completely crazy that you could not make up if you tried. Um, and he's there in it. So just trust him in that process. As far as attachment, I would heavily lean on the Connected Child and TCU's videos there. I mean, you definitely have that time period of just sticking at home. You're the one who gives all the care, the bathing, the feeding, the dressing, that kind of thing to establish that parent bond and relationship. And if they're young enough that you can baby wear them, or like small, and I say small enough because it doesn't really matter how old they are. If you can get them in your lap, that's just always the best thing. So yeah, I definitely would say reach out to that resource there. The Body Keeps Score is another great book to keep in mind as well.
And also, Show Hope's Hope for the Journey is another really good resource as well, to help with attachment. So another quick question here for you, Elena, as we're getting closer to wrapping up, is would you take the car seat if you were adopting domestically and you had to travel to a different state? Would you take the car seat or would you buy it when you arrive?
I would wait and buy it when you got there, if it's a different state. Um, we did not have to cross state lines. Our son was actually born about 2 hours away from us, but just other moms that I know that have gone through the process that have had to travel, that's just one less thing you've got to carry on a plane or pack in the car if you're trying to get out the door quickly. So I would recommend just waiting, and just kind of seeing how everything is going, the health of the baby, um, you know, the size of the baby, all those things. You might like different strollers or car seats. And so just waiting.
There's also the option to, if you are at the hospital, we were on a trip and we door dashed something that we needed. And so that if you're concerned about time frame,
Mm-hmm.
DoorDash a car seat to the hospital if you need it too. As we're looking here too, just had one last question from actually, I think it got answered. Ladies, as we're wrapping, is there anything else that is placed on your heart that you just want to share as a word of encouragement? Or even potentially, were there any miracles? Was there any really cool moments that happened in the waiting that you would just like to give as an encouragement to people as we're heading out here?
We didn't have like any major miracles that really come to mind, but I feel like there were just probably a ton of little miracles happening all along the way, a bunch of stuff that we didn't even know about. Um, One thing that happened was the family that was in front of us in line had just dropped out of the program when our son's file became available. And so it was just kind of like, okay, well, he was meant for us. Like, we didn't think it was our turn yet, but then that happened. And I just know that that was God's plan all along. And another thing that happened was Uganda changed its rules, its laws about adoption there, and you now have to live there for like 2.5 years or something. And that came into play like literally the week after we got guardianship of our son. So I was just like, thank you, Lord, for doing that. Um, but I just want to mention too, there's several questions that come through about failed placements and matches falling through. And unfortunately, it's a really common thing that we see a lot here at both hands. Um, and all I can say to that is that it's so, so hard, but God has a plan for you. Um, Maybe we should do a webinar with some of those moms because I'm just thinking of one right now who, they had a horrible, it was so sad they were matched for so long and then the match fell through. Well, now they have their daughter and it's like, okay, that was super hard, but it was because we were needed to get our daughter, so it's really, really hard to see when you're in it, but like there is a plan. And like Elena said, like your pain is not wasted. There's a reason for all of it, and just hold tight to that and and the other moms who have been through it too. I keep saying that, but it's just so important.
Mhm. And I think you can reach a lot of those moms. There's a plethora of Facebook support groups that I know Crystal has been really active in those over time. And we're not given any like specific ones because there's just so many. But Crystal, what would you give as a tip for what to search if they're trying to find a group on Facebook? What are some keywords that you would say?
There is some caution in finding groups on Facebook. I think it's probably easiest to find your very specific situation because everyone loves to give advice, but honestly, adoption laws vary so drastically from state to state, even county to county, a lot of times. And so you can be very specific, take everyone's experience with a grain of salt because everyone's had a different one, and yours will be different from theirs. And so, yeah, when going through those, obviously look for the amount of people that are involved. The more seems to make it a little more legit. I love the ones that are tied to actual ministries. Those are great, but honestly, nothing beats in person. If you can find the in-person support group in your town, that is your people. That is your tribe, even if it's primarily, you know, through foster care. The parenting is the same once you get them home, and those are your people, and it's going to mean a lot to you to have those people speaking into your life.
Yeah, I think Foster the Family has a lot of local groups across the country, and so does Replanted. So there are some really, really great local groups, and we've seen other moms and dads who have started adoption and foster care ministries within their church. And so I would say if there isn't yet a community, then reach out to your local church and see if there are potentially other people who would be willing to gather and wrap around you guys. And I think that also is where a both hands team becomes really, really valuable as well. We've had several families that have said that they were so glad that they invited their friends and family into their adoption journey and that they had that support and that team and that community around them as they were walking through. And so we're just so grateful for each and every one of you staying on. I'm just so grateful for your time. We will have this recording available that we will email out to you. And so feel free to share that link with anyone who may benefit from hearing from these stories. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about both hands funding, or if we didn't get to your question live, you can also email me at aimee@bothhands.org. And we would just love to be able to come alongside of you and support you in your adoption journey and hope to connect again soon. You'll have a blessed day.